Desiree, and I'm pregnant. The interesting thing about this is that if I were a citizen of China, more than likely this would be the only child I would ever have. This is because of China's one-child policy. In 1979, Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping established the one-child policy to limit communist China's population growth. When it was first introduced, the Chinese government stated that the policy would be a short-term measure and that the goal was to move towards a voluntary small family culture. However, 30 years later, the policy is still being enforced, and in 2008, China's top population officials stated that there would be no major changes to the overall family planning policy for at least another decade. Yardley, 2008. Although the one-child policy has been fairly effective in keeping China's population numbers down, it has come at much too high of a cost for millions of China's citizens because it takes away individual choice, putting the power of family planning into the government's hands. It is unfair financially, and it is causing a growing gender imbalance and negative attitude towards females. The policy allows the government to take away individual choice in many ways. The number of children, their spacing, and even the timing of marriage and childbirth are all subject to regulation by the socialist state. Stephen Mosher, president of the Population Research Institute, wrote a journal article about his experience in China during the first few years of the policy. Mosher stated, "I went with young mothers to family planning study sessions where they were browbeaten by party officials for getting pregnant. I followed them as they were unwillingly taken to clinics, and I watched as they were aborted and sterilized against their will." Mosher saw some of the more brutal aspects of the policy, but these aspects were very common during the first few years. "Use whatever means you must to reduce China's population," China's paramount leaders have ordered party officials back in 1979. Mosher, 2006. Today, the majority of China still requires intrauterine devices for women of childbearing age with one child, sterilization for couples with 2 or more children, which is usually performed on the woman, and abortions on women who are pregnant without authorization. According to a 2008 journal article written by Babette Francis, articles in the Chinese media openly speak of the need for coercion in family planning, and senior officials continue to endorse the policy as currently practiced. Citizens of China face many different types of reinforcement when it comes to family planning, and have been for the last 30 years. Using large amounts of propaganda to encourage citizens to follow the one-child policy is a common practice in China. These are a few examples of propaganda posters that can be found in China. This poster states, "Do a good job in family planning to promote economic development," while this poster states, "Less births, better births, develop China vigorously." The third poster states, "Carry out family planning, implement the basic national policy." Fong and White, 2006. In all of these posters, the people are smiling or look happy or proud and are surrounded by bright colors, making it seem as if they are all very happy with their decision to stick with the family planning policy. Although these types of posters are commonly found, it's not the only kind of propaganda that people in China must deal with. As you can see in this picture, a woman in Beijing simply riding her bicycle down a path must pass a large billboard encouraging her to have only one child. Hind, 2001. These forms of propaganda play a big part in the government's attempt to control its citizens when it comes to family planning, and give us a good idea of what kind of environment the government is surrounding its people with. Not only does the policy take away individual choice, it is often very unfair financially. The government encourages people to only have one child through a package of financial and other incentives such as preferential access to housing, schools, and health services. When women do have more than one child, the second or subsequent pregnancies are often accompanied by pressures to abort the pregnancy or forced sterilization, but also fines. Discouragement of large families includes financial levies on each additional child, and sanctions which range from social pressures to curtailed career prospects for those in government jobs. Kane and Choi, 1999. It is argued by those leading China that the sacrifice of a second or third child is necessary for the sake of future generations. The future generation, however, is becoming a problem that the Chinese government has to now worry about. As a result of the one-child policy, China is facing a growing gender imbalance and an increased negative attitude towards females. The policy has caused a disdain for female infants. Abortion, neglect, abandonment, and even infanticide have been known to occur. According to China Daily, 118 Chinese boys were born for every 100 Chinese girls in 2007. The natural ratio is 106 boys for 100 girls. The 118 to 100 Chinese split is just for births and doesn't account for the far greater number of girls than boys who are allowed to starve to death as children or who are sent to ill-managed orphanages. 95% of Chinese orphans are girls. And in some places, the imbalance is even more severe, such as the prosperous Guangdong province, where the ratio is 130 boys per 100 girls. Francis, 2008. Faced with hard choices about overall numbers, the Chinese girl child has once again become expendable. This attitude towards females does not only affect the infant girls of China, but also has an enormous impact on the lives of grown Chinese women. Increased pressure to produce the desired child and a perceived reduction in the value of females has led China to having one of the world's highest rates of suicide of women in their reproductive years. Kane and Choi, 1999. There are fears that these consequences will have a real threat to China's stability in the future. In conclusion, the reductions in fertility that have resulted from China's one-child policy have eased at least some of the pressures on communities, state, and the environment in a country which still carries 1/5 of the world's people. However, these benefits have come at an extremely high cost for millions. The Chinese government is facing an important challenge: the need to balance the basic human right of reproduction with population growth. Until that challenge is met in a way that is acceptable to both the government and the people of China, there will continue to be a large amount of problems surrounding this issue. Any questions?
Why was the one-child policy put into effect?
The policy came up as an option after the government spent years dealing with problems that come from having more people than their resources could handle. The socialist state is responsible for employing, educating, feeding, and housing, and as the population grew at an incredible rate, it became too much of a burden on the government.
Why do people in the Chinese culture prefer boys over girls?
It has to do with keeping the family name, preventing extinction of the family line, and the belief that boys can provide more than girls in ways such as physical labor, earning money, and taking care of their parents when they're elderly. Thank you.